I'm Rick, the Fat Man GM. You may or may have not have heard of me babbling and rambling on a few of the YouTube channels and Facebook channels regarding to our hobby, role-playing games in general, tabletop games, wargaming, so on and so forth. I have started back when I was in my early teens. I have well over 40 years worth of experience in this hobby that we love and share. And a big part of what I like to do is go back and revisit a lot of the stuff that I have and have accumulated in my gaming career, if you will. And everything from MERP, Starfleet, from FASA, a slew of Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun, Star Wars, etc., etc., etc. And I revisit these items individually, and hopefully to give some nostalgia for myself, to give you a little bit of an insight into some game system that you may or may not have heard of or may have not had the opportunity to play, and to remind those of us out there that do have them that these are quite viable and still entertaining today. So here we go. Alright, here we go. This is the Teeth of Mordor, Fortresses of Middle-earth series by Iron Crown Enterprises for Middle-earth role-playing game, or MERP. This is one of the series that I'd hoped they had done more of. They did it was later in the franchise history, and they did do 4 or 5 of these variants thereof, but not as many as they could have. And I always kind of wish they, like I said, they had done more. But I'm guessing Iron Crown was either winding down at that point or losing ground. At some point, they did lose the franchise rights to Dungeons or to Middle Earth, and it was carried over to somebody else and later. So this particular one was done in 1988. First edition is 1988. I think it was in the early 90s, 90, 91, maybe 89, but I know that the series was coming to an end because they just didn't put out stuff anymore. At some point they stopped putting it out altogether. So in this particular, we get the introduction. The most fearsome gate complexes in Middle-earth, the Teeth of Mordor, guard enemy entry into Mordor. They were constructed, blah blah blah. Fortress series, explaining the Fortress series itself. Terminology, little notes on adapting between. So if you wanted to use D&D rules, you could easily adapt to the D20 system or the D6 system, however you particular style. MERP is like Rollmaster, is based on the percentile system, or the D100, and for all intents and purposes you just divide it by 5. So a weapon with a 40% modifier is a +4 weapon. We get the background on the Towers of the Teeth, the Dunedain Citadel. You can actually find some interesting videos done on a number of different YouTube channels, much more historically based for the Middle-earth material, or Lord of the Rings and J.R.R. Tolkien's universe. This, of course, is just the game related material, as I was seeing something the other day on YouTube about Towers of the Teeth and the history behind it. The Dunedain Citadel. So Isidore is the one that set in plans in motion to build a bunch of these fortresses to guard Mordor from the bad guys from re-entering and using Mordor in the future. He then went north and gets killed, of course, and it's his brother's son or something that actually lays down the foundation and starts the work, and it takes better part of 300-400 years before the project's completely finished. Talk about when the plague years, the ring race, re-entering Mordor, preparation for war, etc. The fortress itself, the design. One of the things that I always thought was, kind of twisted, is that even though the fact it was constructed by Gondor and Gondorian engineers and craftsmen, the thing has all the look of something the Dark Lord's people would have constructed. And you have to wonder if there wasn't still something going on in the minds of the designers they weren't being, they said it was to fit the terrain, to fit the environment, but it seemed like to me it was, I don't know, it should a Gondorian construction should have stood out. It should have made it so it was obviously different from the surrounding terrain. But that's just my opinion. It said the entire fortress is constructed from black, glassy stone, similar in appearance to the story of Orthiok, though not as resilient. The walls of Moran are slick, seamless, but obsidian look more like they were wrenched from the agony of the hills and built by the hands of men. Indeed, the jagged chiseled towers form a profile not unlike cruel fangs from the jaws of some huge sleeping beast. Alright, so we got the layout. And that's pretty much the whole book is about, is the blueprints and the room-by-room layout. Karhos, the Fang Fortress, the western tower of the pair, going under level 1 underground, working its way up. Aside from running this in a Middle-earth campaign, I have utilized this particular and several of its companion books for other campaigns that I've run in other settings, in D&D specifically, but I also did one in Star Wars once where this was a fortress of not a bad guy. It was, well, they were bad people, but it was a kind of like a Sith-like order, but not Sith. They were still Force-oriented, but it worked real well. I think the players had a good time, and so we can go level by level, character, High Priest quarters, chapel, the library. It says here, like the chapel, this is a 2-story chamber. 59. That's the chapel. However, an elaborate iron walkway which runs around the perimeter room, allowing access to second level stacks. 3 narrow iron spiral staircases connect the main level to the walkway. It should be noted that libraries such as this were made up mainly of huge handwritten tomes bound together by hand and racks of scrolls. Printing as such is extremely rare in Middle Earth at this time. The library survived pretty much intact after it was abandoned by the Gondorians. The priest managed to reclaim the area and spends considerable time here now reading about Gondor's history. So we got, that makes sense though. This as a watch post, as a posting for a military person, this is a pretty hostile environment, pretty easily to become disenchanted or depressed. Probably the whole neighborhood very rocky and very hostile. Almost could be considered a punishment detail for the wrong people. A second. So having access to things like a fairly well-stocked library would be important for morale purposes, among other things, because most Gondorians, so the high men themselves, were very goal-oriented towards educating and improving themselves. So we got Narchos, the fire tower, which is the opposite tower, of course. And there's a beautiful little hand drawing, very respectable. I wish I could do artwork on this scale, on this level. Ramp. It's the viewing chamber. Nice blueprints. Gate, massive ironbound gate. See, massive ironbound. Some of the gates, wall gates in number 7, much heavier, more strongly reinforced. Iron plating is 3 inches thick. The doors are locked shut with huge steel bolts, which slam into place all around the perimeter of the iron panels, fixing them effectively in place. Officers' quarters, ballista hall. A nice little addition there The ballista hull, 2 sets of strong steel doors protect a pair of powerful ballistas. These machines were built by skilled armorers and can be very accurate. Their primary purpose is to fire on assault machines and scaling towers. A little bit further on in development, something what I call cannons in there. I had turbo lasers in there when I was doing it as a Star Wars implement. And then there's the main gate itself for the Morannon. Then we got the garrison under Gondor, Mordor's garrison, information on J.R.R. of Wa, one of the ringwraiths who was assigned to, basically this was his place to keep under control and to, quote, reside in. An undead thing can reside anywhere. The mouth of Sauron, the Black Nimrian Kernax, a astrologer who is also the living captain of the Morannon. The human garrison, Orc and Troll garrison, hounds of the Morannon, the flying beast or the fell beast. Then we got some short adventures. Fourth Age, adventures after 1640, before 1640. And then a little mastery information for NPCs and stuff. So it's not a very big, it's not very big, but there's a lot of detailed information specifically for this type of setting. And like I said, there's others, and I will get around to reviewing them at some future point. Because at one point, actually, a couple years back, I think I read the entire MERP collection, but it was before I had figured out how to do this downward rig thing, and so you could actually see what I'm doing. So at the other time, I was just holding it up, and I'd show you pictures, and you might even run across a few of those entries. They're going to view different than the ones that I'm doing now, but it's kind of the point, right? We get better, we improve, we do things and change things. So, the fortresses of Middle-earth, the Teeth of Mordor.